Hey everybody, Brian King here. I was looking at one of the ADHD groups this morning, and a parent was talking about how difficult her day had started because it began with her kid who had not yet had his morning medication, coming down and being demanding and angry and insulting and doing anything they could to just disrupt the morning. And I was offering suggestions about things they could say, different ways they could respond. And the long and short of it was, she said, well, we try not to be reactive when our son acts this way, but there's only so much a person can take. And I said something kind of simple in response to that, something along the lines of, well, maybe it would help to learn some additional skills, or I think some additional skills would be helpful. And she responded, yes. But the reality is, when you say something like that, people can only take so much. That's not a truth. That's a limiting belief. One of the things that I've studied throughout my life are people who have been able to be resilient in seemingly unsurvivable or intolerable situations. You study survivors of the concentration camps. You study stories of people that were slaves and then emerged from slavery and led very full lives. People who stood on the front lines of the civil rights movement. They were attacked by dogs. They were sprayed with fire hoses, and yet they maintained their calm and their composure. How on earth did they do this? It's not because they're superhuman, folks. Because often when you compare yourselves to them, you say, oh, I could never be like that. Or they must have something special about them. The reality is, a lot of what they have special about them is their beliefs. Bottom line. And this is something I talk about constantly, is the power of mindset before skill set. People, either they prepare themselves to be in these moments, or once they're in those moments, they learn the beliefs, the skills, they develop the bonds they need to get through it. People that survive long prison sentences sometimes do it through very strong friendships that give them some sense of meaning, connection, so that they can endure it, grow from it. So if it's beliefs, how can a belief, I believe tomorrow is going to be a better day. I'm not talking about stuff like that. I believe it'll all work out. I'm not talking about stuff like that. Let's go back to the example of the kid that has ADHD or Asperger's or autism that is melting down in front of you, that is throwing stuff, and these are the beliefs you have about it. This kid better learn to behave himself. This kid better learn self-respect. Or this kid better learn to respect me because I deserve respect. How dare that kid treat me like this? No child should be allowed to treat their parent this way. You hear the beliefs in there? When you say things like that, when you believe things like that, you're building up this sense of, I'm at odds with my child. I'm in competition with my child. This is a power struggle where the acceptable ending is that this child needs to submit to my authority as a parent and needs to do what they're told. Yeah, there's going to be this point of no return for you where you're going to say, that's it, this is unacceptable, how dare he, and so on and so forth. And you're going to start exacting some disciplinary repercussions that you may not be very proud of. I can speak from experience on this. What I eventually got to with my oldest in particular, because there was a period where he's 11, 12 years old, and he was having meltdowns where he was trying to kick holes in the wall, and I think he succeeded a couple times. He was threatening to break things. He was threatening to break people. His brothers were living in fear of him. And when he would start swinging and getting violent, there was a time, and some of this was just intuition, and some of this was because of the training I had going through my social work degree, but he was smaller. He was not a 150-pound 20-year-old who's still throwing tantrums. He was a skinny 11-year-old, and I sat down on the couch, and with his back to me, I sat him on my thigh, I wrapped my arms around him and held him tight, giving him deep pressure. I put my head next to his, because if you put your head right behind a kid that's swinging their head around, you might get a broken nose, okay? And I was aware of this. So I put my head next to his, almost ear to ear. And as I was holding him, I validated his feelings. Hey, man, I can tell that you're going through a lot right now. I know it seems like it's so much. I know how overwhelming it can be, but you know what? Right here, right now, it's you and me. We're in this together. I'm not going anywhere. The belief in that moment was his feelings matter. His feelings to him are very valid. He needs someone to connect with him. He is feeling out of control, like it's him against the world. So when you have beliefs that are, it's me against him, I'm the parent, he's the child, he needs to learn to do what he's told, you're validating that belief. So when you try and get him to adhere to your beliefs of, it's me against you and I'm going to win, you escalate your child. Now, I'm not saying that none of that's true, that he needs to learn how to be respectful to elders and all that. There's a time and a place for that. You don't teach that during a meltdown. You know, kids that say, oh, I'm going to kill myself, you know, I just can't do it anymore. Little kids saying this stuff. And what parents tend to want to do in those situations is say, oh, honey, don't talk like that. That's not true. You know, people love you. People think you're the best. Did you just validate his feelings? No, you completely ignore them. But what is at the bottom of a statement like that is a feeling of helplessness. It's a child who feels like they have no solutions to the problems in their life. So it's either suffer this helplessness or get the hell out of Dodge, usually in the form of ending their own life. So one of the questions I learned to ask my kids was, would you like to feel like that option's not necessary? Well, yeah, but I can't see why that is. Well, would you like to consider some options? Yeah, I guess. So what would have to be working better in your life for you to not feel like killing yourself was necessary? Now you're brainstorming. Now you're talking about ideas. You're considering solutions that without that conversation, without beginning with that validation, your child may have never considered those options. Because all you were trying to do is minimize, fix, and maybe make yourself comfortable. Because the idea of a child wanting to kill themselves could mean, I'm a failure as a parent, and I can't handle that. So I have got to sweet talk this out of existence. There's a lot more to be said about that conversation, but it's just another example. Let's go back to when my son was having a meltdown. I would validate his feelings. I would say, as I mentioned earlier, we're in this together. I'm not going anywhere. I've got your back. We are going to stay here until we're both calm. And then I would let him hear me breathe. I would start breathing deeply, a little bit louder, so he would hear me. I wasn't telling him, calm down, knock it off. You got to learn to cope better. All those bullshit things they say in school to kids all the time. I let him hear me breathe, because one thing that happens really naturally between parent and child, and I heard a parent explain this in the very group I was in, which is you can be with your child while your child's having a hard time. And as long as you remain calm, that sends out an energy, folks. And your child will naturally begin to match you over time. It may take your child 20 minutes or longer, but at some point, the two of you will sync and your child synchronize, not sync as in drown, okay? You'll synchronize and your child will begin to calm. Well, what if you could be a little bit more overt about that? Letting your child hear you breathe helps them become aware of their own breathing, realizing it's hyperventilating, it's shallow, it doesn't feel good, it feels panicky. And a subconscious cue that now comes from your example is, maybe I should try and calm my breathing down. And with my oldest, I was able to do this a lot. Just have him join me in breathing, because deep breathing is naturally calming. And that's one way to bring them down out of the stratosphere without playing I'm going to pretend you're not upset. I'm going to minimize it. I'm going to make it about me and my desire for power and control. You need to teach your child how to self-calm. You need to teach them that there's only so much a person can take. It's only true in a situation that you do not yet have skills to manage. So, I just can't take anymore. Great. Now we know where the gap is. Now we know where you need to become stronger and learn some new knowledge so that next time it happens, you can take it. Do you think all the crap I deal with on a daily basis is stuff I woke up knowing how to manage? Everything that life has ever hit me with, I started by feeling sorry for myself, crying, cursing at God, being really angry. But then when I got sick of feeling like a victim, I would ask myself, what resources do I need in order to be able to shoulder this? And I think of resources in terms of people, places, and things, knowledge, skills, relationships. So I ask myself, who knows? Who's been through this before? Who knows what it is to live with this fully? When I was diagnosed with the MS, I went right for the MS groups on Facebook. I went online and looked for the organizations because these people knew how to do it. I learned a lot from them very quickly. When I learned that I might be in a wheelchair for a long time, I went to one of my good friends who was paralyzed in his 20s and knew what it was like to go from walking to wheelchair. And he taught me a lot of his psychology and asked me some great questions so I could become more at home at that. You see, this idea, there's only so much a person can take. Man, are you setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for stagnation instead of growth because you are mistakenly believing that you have limits in terms of what you can shoulder, in terms of what you can manage. Look at this, the history of ordinary people. Like I said, ordinary people, shopkeepers, parents, who were suddenly swept up by the Nazis, threw in concentration camps, and for all intents and purposes should have died from their own depression, their helplessness, whatever, but many of them didn't because they discovered a capacity within themselves to grow stronger from that experience. And those that were allowed to live and tell that story have written a lot of books. Go find them. There's so much genius in those books. It demonstrates the power of the human soul, the human capacity to be able to handle just about anything. So when you say to yourself, or hear somebody else say, well, I guess he just couldn't take it. Or, I just couldn't handle it anymore. Well, under the circumstances, if you do not do what it takes to learn what is necessary to be able to become the person that can handle those things, then yeah, you're going to reach a threshold. You're going to reach a limit. But I'm telling you this now, the limit is self-imposed. Whether it's a diagnosis, an accident of birth, your economic status, these are all things that can be very potentially limiting, or they could be very potentially opportunistic in terms of giving you leverage to work harder to prove that these limits are not limits. They're potentially doors to more resourcefulness and more creative solutions than maybe anybody else has thought of before. But you got to see it that way. You got to believe it, and you got to act according to those beliefs. Or yes, you will find that there's only so much you can take. So this is my 2 cents on this. Now, hopefully it's been useful for you. If so, please comment, let me know. If there's somebody else that can benefit from this message, please share it with them. They'll thank you for it. This has been Brian, and we'll talk again soon.